Hi, my name is Karen, and I'm an American lay student of Ajahn Sachat, or Pra Ajahn Sachat Abhijato, who's given me the very special honor of being asked by him to record this book for you. This book was written by Pra Ajahn Sachat's own teacher, the Venerable Acariya Boowa Nanasampanno, and is a spiritual biography written by him about his teacher, the Venerable Acariya Mun Biography. The title of the book is Venerable Acariya Mun Biography, A Spiritual Biography by Acariya Boowa Nanasampanno, and it was published in 2005, translated into English by Bhikkhu Dick Silaratano. The text of this book is over 450 pages long, not including the appendices, which include numerous educational footnotes and a wonderful glossary. I've chosen not to read these, as it would make for a difficult listening experience. I sincerely mean no disrespect to Ajahn Silaratano and acknowledge his great effort in compiling these. So I highly encourage you to download a free copy of the book so that you may study the appendices, as well as see all of the wonderful photos throughout the book. And that web address is lungta.eu, and that's spelled LUANGTA.EU. Then just click on the books link. If you'd like a free hard copy mailed to you, look for the contacts link for information on how to request a hard copy. Also on lungta.eu, under the references link, there's a lovely, simple Thai and Pali glossary section there in case you want to easily look up some words online as we go along. So again, that's under the references link on lungta.eu. I'll be recording this book in separate recordings of roughly 20 minutes each to try to keep the audio and video file sizes smaller, and this also just seems to be a good length of time for listeners. This does mean, however, that chapters will end and begin sometimes in the middle of a recording. So if you'd like a list of which pages are read in each separate recording and which chapters they include for future reference, you can get that list by contacting Ajahn Sachat's assistant, and that contact information is on prasachat.com, which is spelled PHRASUCHART.com, and you'll see the contact link, which includes both their mailing and email addresses, so you have different options on how to contact them. To get to the English section of prasachat.com, which is in Thai on the home page, just look on the upper right-hand corner and you'll find a small button that says English. You can also find their email address on Prasachat's Facebook page, which is called Dhamma for the Asking, and Dhamma is spelled D-H-A-M-M-A. So Dhamma for the Asking on Facebook. As far as the format of this book, it's broken down into 7 chapters, and each chapter has multiple separate subsections under that subject. While reading the book, if I skip over any pages, it's only because there are photos or there simply just isn't any text on those pages. But I will be reading the entire text of the book for you, other than some of the appendices at the back of the book. This book, in any form, is to be given away for free. Any ads you may see or hear in this recording have been put there by the platform you're using to listen or view with for its own revenue, in exchange for letting us use their platform for free. Please forgive me for any mispronunciations of names, places, or words, as I'm still learning how to pronounce Thai and Pali, and for any background noises, as I'm just making these recordings in my apartment with an unruly dog and in the middle of a city. And now let us begin reading Venerable Acariya Mun Biography, A Spiritual Biography by Acariya Boowa Nanasampanno. On the bottom of the title page, it says, "This book is a gift of Dhamma and printed for free distribution only." And a couple of pages later, there's a lovely photograph of a temple. And at the bottom of it, it says, "A Forest Dhamma publication of Baan Taad Forest Monastery," with the logo in the middle for Forest Dhamma Books, Baan Taad Forest Monastery. On the copyright page, it says, there's a quote of the Buddha that says, "The gift of Dhamma excels all other gifts." And the copyright date is 2005 by Venerable Acariya Maha Boowa Nanasampanno. And it says, "This book is a free gift of Dhamma and may not be offered for sale. All commercial rights reserved. The Dhamma should not be sold like goods in the marketplace. Permission to reproduce in any way for free distribution as a gift of Dhamma is hereby granted, and no further permission need be obtained. Reproduction in any way for commercial gain is prohibited." And then it has the copyright information and the address for Forest Dhamma Books at Baan Taad Forest Monastery. And I'll let you get that on the Lungta website. But it does have the website listed here, which is forestdhammabooks.com. And that is Forest, Forest, and Dhamma spelled Dhamma, books.com, forestdhammabooks.com. The contents page, I'm not going to read every single section. I think that would be tedious for both of us. And so what I'll do is I'll just give you the titles. But under every chapter, there are a number of subsections, as I mentioned before. So the contents, just to let you know how the book is laid out, it starts with the translator's introduction, and then a section about the author, and then the author's preface. And then chapter 1 is titled The Early Years, chapter 2, The Middle Years, chapter 3, A Heart Released, chapter 4, The Chiang Mai Years, chapter 5, Unusual Questions, Enlightening Answers, chapter 6, The Final Years, and that's through the funeral, chapter 7, The Legacy, which includes the last section of that chapter is conclusion, and that's followed by Appendix 1, 2, and then acknowledgments, notes, and glossary. So I will now read the translator's introduction, written by Bhikkhu Dik Silaratano. Venerable Acariya Mun Buddhadatta Thera is a towering figure in contemporary Thai Buddhism. He was widely revered and respected during his lifetime for the extraordinary courage and determination he displayed in practicing the ascetic way of life, and for his uncompromising strictness in teaching his many disciples. During the 50 years since his death, he has assumed an exalted status in Buddhist circles, and thus remains an overshadowing presence whose life and teachings have become synonymous with the Buddha's noble quest for self-transformation. Although Acariya Mun, and in parentheses it says, pronounced to rhyme with son, left no written record of his own, this biography, compiled by one of his close disciples some 20 years after his death, is largely responsible for introducing his life, his achievements, and his teachings to a broad section of Buddhist society. Through the widespread popularity of this book, many Thai Buddhists have been given fresh hope that the spiritual liberation which the Buddha proclaimed to the world over 2,500 years ago, and which has been attained by so many aspirants over the succeeding centuries, is still accessible in today's modern age. Many Thais have expressed the view that they had lost confidence that Magga, Phala, and Nibbana were still relevant today. But by reading Acariya Mun's biography, they realized that accounts of these exalted attainments are not mere fragments of ancient history, dead and dry, but a living, luminous legacy of self-transcendence accessible to any individual who is willing and able to put forth the effort needed to achieve them. They have come to understand that Buddhist monks, with their distinctive robes and monastic vocation, are not merely clerical figures representing the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Some of them are indeed living proof of the truth presented in the Buddha's teaching. The noble aim of spiritual liberation must be accomplished by the appropriate means, the middle way, as taught by the Lord Buddha. Although the Buddha forbade the use of self-mortification as a means to gain enlightenment, he nevertheless authorized and encouraged those specialized ascetic practices known as Dhatangas that harmonize effectively with this noble effort. The true middle way is not the smooth path of least resistance, negotiated with easy compromises and happy mediums, but rather it is that path of practice which most effectively counters the mental defilements that impede progress by resisting the aspirant every step of the way. The spiritual path is often arduous, being full of hardship and discomfort, while the inner forces opposed to success are formidable and even intimidating. Thus, the work of the spiritual warrior requires potent countermeasures to subvert the inertial powers of laziness, craving, pride, and self-importance. So the Buddha encouraged monks who were truly keen on extricating their hearts from the subtlest manifestations of these insidious defilements to practice the Dhatangas. Such ascetic observances are specifically designed to promote simplicity, humility, self-restraint, vigilance, and introspection in a monk's everyday life, and the Buddha was known to praise those monks who undertook their practice. For this reason, the lifestyle of a Buddhist monk is founded on the ideal of life as a homeless wanderer who, having renounced the world and gone forth from the household, dresses in robes made from discarded cloth, depends on alms for a living, and takes the forest as his dwelling place. This ideal of the wandering forest monk, intent on the Buddha's traditional spiritual quest, is epitomized by the Dhamma Kammatthana way of life. Like Dhamma, Kammatthana is a term designating a specific orientation shared by Buddhist monks who are dedicated to maintaining an austere meditative lifestyle. Kammatthana, and in parentheses, literally translated as basis of work, denotes an approach to meditation practice that is directed toward uprooting every aspect of greed, hatred, and delusion from the heart, and thus demolishing all bridges linking the mind to the cycle of repeated birth and death. Kammatthana, with its emphasis on meditative development, and Dhamma, with its emphasis on the ascetic way of life conducive to intensive meditation, complement each other perfectly in the noble effort to transcend the cycle of rebirth. They, along with the code of monastic discipline, are the cornerstones on which the edifice of a monk's practice is erected. Both the letter and the spirit of this ascetic life of meditation can be found embodied in the life and teaching of Acariya Mun. From the day he first ordained until the day he passed away, his entire way of life and the example he set for his disciples were modeled on the principles incorporated in these practices. He is credited with reviving, revitalizing, and eventually popularizing the Dhamma Kammatthana tradition in Thailand. Through his lifelong efforts, Dhamma monks, and in parentheses, or Kammatthana monks, the two terms are used interchangeably, and the mode of practice they espouse became and still remain a prominent feature of the Buddhist landscape there. Acariya Mun was especially gifted as a motivator and teacher. Many of the monks who trained directly under his tutelage have distinguished themselves by their spiritual achievements, becoming well-known teachers in their own right. They have passed on his distinctive teaching methods to their disciples in a spiritual lineage that extends to the present day. As a result, the Dhamma Kammatthana mode of practice gradually spread throughout the country, along with Acariya Mun's exalted reputation. This nationwide acclaim began to escalate during the last years of his life and continued to grow after his death until he came to be considered a national saint by almost unanimous consent. In recent decades, he has gained recognition beyond the confines of his native land as one of the 20th century's truly great religious figures. Acariya Mun's life epitomized the Buddhist ideal of the wandering monk intent on renunciation and solitude, walking alone through forests and mountains in search of secluded places that offer mind and body a calm, quiet environment in which to practice meditation for the purpose of transcending all suffering. His was a life lived entirely out of doors, at the mercy of the elements and the vagaries of weather. In such an environment, a Dhutanga monk developed a deep appreciation of nature. His daily life was full of forests and mountains, rivers and streams, caves, overhanging cliffs, and wild creatures large and small. He moved from place to place by hiking along lonely wilderness trails in remote frontier regions where the population was sparse and village communities far apart. Since his livelihood depended on the alms food he collected from those small settlements, a Dhutanga monk never knew where his next meal would come from, or whether he would get any food at all. Despite the hardships and the uncertainties, the forest was a home to the wandering monk. It was his school, his training ground, and his sanctuary, and life there was safe, provided that he remained vigilant and faithful to the principles of the Buddha's teaching. Living and practicing in the relatively uncultivated, undomesticated, rural backwater that comprised most of Thailand at the turn of the 20th century, a Dhutanga monk like Acariya Mun found himself wandering through a centuries-old setting, little changed from the time of the Buddha 2,500 years ago. It is helpful to understand the temporal and cultural background to Acariya Mun's wandering lifestyle. Thailand in the late 19th and early 20th centuries was a loose confederation of principalities that were largely inaccessible to the central authority because most of the land was densely forested and paved roads were almost non-existent. During that period, 80% of Thailand's landmass was blanketed with pristine forests of mostly deciduous hardwoods and thick subtropical undergrowth. The lives of people in the hinterland areas were sustained by subsistence farming and the hunting of wild animals. Teeming with tigers and elephants, the vast forests were seen as being dangerous and frightening places. So the inhabitants banded together in village communities for the safety and companionship they provided. In the more remote frontier regions, such settlements were often a day's walk from one another, following trails that made their way through uninterrupted woodland. Forests and rhythms of nature were defining features of the folklore and culture of those hardy people. To the villagers living together in isolated communities, the vast tracts of wilderness were forbidding, inhospitable territory where wild animals roamed freely and malevolent spirits were said to hold sway. The huge Bengal tigers indigenous to that part of the world were especially fearsome. Such creatures ruled not only the forests, but the fears and fantasies of local people and the monks alike. Popular fear of those impenetrable forest areas turned them into places of isolation and solitude where no one dared to venture alone. It was in this remote wilderness environment that Acariya Mun and his Dhutanga monks lived and wandered, practicing the ascetic way of life. Their meditation practice and the mental fortitude it instilled in them were their only defenses against the hardships and potential dangers they faced every day. Forests and mountains were proven training grounds for such monks, who saw themselves as spiritual warriors, battling their own mental defilements for the sake of ultimate victory. The story of Acariya Mun's life is a vivid portrait of a consummate spiritual warrior, unrivaled in modern times, who practiced the Buddha's path to freedom with such perfection that he left those who knew and revered him in no doubt that he truly was a noble disciple. A beautiful story from beginning to end, his life is reminiscent of those famed accounts of the Buddha's great disciples chronicled in the ancient texts. Like theirs, his life shows us that the spiritual ideals taught by the Buddha are achieved by real human beings, struggling against the same fundamental hindrances that we find within ourselves. Thus, we are made to feel that the Buddha's ancient path to spiritual liberation is as wholly relevant today as it was 2,500 years ago. To this end, this biography of Acariya Mun is less concerned with the precise account of events as they unfolded in Acariya Mun's life and career than it is with providing a source of inspiration and edification for those devoted to Buddhist ideals. The author's perspective is that of an affirmative witness and advocate, rather than an impartial observer chronicling events. Being a spiritual biography, it is intended to give us an insight into a model spiritual life. As such, this book should be viewed, above all, as an exercise in contemplation. One aspect of Acariya Mun's teaching career deserves special mention, as it surfaces time and again in the course of his biography. Acariya Mun possessed a unique ability to communicate directly with non-human beings from many different realms of existence. He was continually in contact with beings in the higher and lower celestial realms, spirits of the terrestrial realms, nagas, yakas, ghosts of many sorts, and even the denizens of the hell realms, all of whom are invisible to the human eye and inaudible to the human ear, but clearly known by the inner psychic faculties of divine sight and divine hearing. The comprehensive worldview underlying Buddhist cosmology differs significantly from the view of the gross physical universe presented to us by contemporary science. In the traditional Buddhist worldview, the universe is inhabited not only by the gross physical beings that comprise the human and animal worlds, but also by various classes of non-physical divine beings called devas that exist in a hierarchy of increasing subtlety and refinement, and by numerous classes of lower beings living in the subhuman realms of existence. Only the human and animal worlds are discernible to normal human sense faculties. The others dwell in a spiritual dimension that exists outside the range of human concepts of space and time, and therefore beyond the sphere of the material universe as we perceive it. It was Acariya Mun's remarkable inherent capacity for communicating with many classes of living beings that made him a teacher of truly universal significance. Knowing that living beings throughout the sentient universe share a common heritage of repeated existence and a common desire to avoid suffering and gain happiness, a great teacher realizes their common need to understand the way of Dhamma in order to fulfill their spiritual potential and attain enduring happiness. Having the eye of wisdom, he made no fundamental distinction between the hearts of people and the hearts of devas, but tailored his teaching to fit their specific circumstances and levels of understanding. Although the message was essentially the same, the medium of communication was different. He communicated with human beings through the medium of verbal expression, while he used nonverbal, telepathic communication with all classes of non-human beings. To appreciate Acariya Mun's extraordinary abilities, we must be prepared to accept that the world we perceive through our senses constitutes only a small portion of experiential reality, that there exists this spiritual universe of devas and brahmas, which is beyond the range of our limited sense faculties. For in truth, the universe of the wise is much more vast than the one perceived by the average person. The wise can know and understand dimensions of reality that others do not even suspect exist, and their knowledge of the principles underlying all existence gives them an insight into the phenomenal world that defies conventional limits. Acariya Mun's finely tuned powers of perception contacted an immense variety of external phenomena, and in the best Buddhist tradition, he spent a considerable amount of time and energy engaged in teaching them Dhamma. Such beings were as much a part of his personal world experience as the wild animals in the forest and the monks he trained so tirelessly. By virtue of his unparalleled expertise in these matters, he always felt a special obligation toward their spiritual welfare. Such phenomena are what Acariya Mun called mysteries of the heart, for they are conscious, living beings dwelling in spiritual dimensions that are just as real as the one we inhabit, even though those spheres lie outside the realm of human existential concepts. The words heart and mind are used interchangeably in Thai vernacular. Heart is often the preferred term, as mind tends to exclude the emotional and spiritual dimensions associated with the heart. The heart is the essential knowing nature that forms the basic foundation of the entire sentient universe. It is the fundamental awareness underlying all conscious existence and the very basis of all mental and emotional processes. The heart forms the core within the bodies of all living beings. It is the center, the substance, the primary essence within the body. Constantly emphasizing its paramount significance, Acariya Mun always claimed that the heart is the most important thing in the world. For this reason, the story of Acariya Mun's life and teachings is a story of the heart's struggle for spiritual transcendence and a revelation of the ineffable mystery of the heart's pure essence. The Pali term citta is a word that Acariya Mun often used when referring to this essential knowing nature, commonly known as heart and mind. Like so many words in the Buddhist lexicon, it is essentially a technical term used specifically in the science of Buddhist theory and practice. Since such terms represent salient aspects of the subject matter of this book, some of them have been kept in their original form. Generally, in cases where a suitably accurate English translation exists, that word has been substituted, with the Pali term in question being annotated in an explanatory note. There are, however, certain terms for which, due to the complex and comprehensive nature of the truths they represent, no truly adequate English word exists. Those specialized terms have largely been left in the original Pali. They may be found explained in the notes and glossary sections at the back of the book, and the reader is encouraged to take full advantage of these reference materials. And we're going to end there today. We will begin the next recording with the section titled About the Author. We are still in the beginning portion of the book prior to chapter 1. I'll see you next time with Metta. Bye-bye.